In this video, we're going to talk about one of the newer rear racks that we've seen, the MICA Rat Tail. Many of you have actually asked about this rear rack in the comments over the last handful of videos, wondering what it is. So, well, in this video, I'm going to finally share my thoughts on this pretty cool little rack. Let's do it. But before we do dive into my thoughts on this rack, I do want to take a quick moment to let you all know that this video is supported in part by Gunnison Crested Butte. Gunnison County has long been a hub for gravel cyclists. Just look back to the 1970s when riders were tackling Pearl Pass on clunkers. While times have certainly changed, the county remains as expansive as ever. It's 1.5 times the size of Delaware, with most of that land being public. In fact, there are over 1,100 miles of dirt and gravel roads, perfect for piecing together a multi-day bikepacking trip or heading out for a quick hour-long gravel spin. So to plan your trip or just to inquire, you can click on the card in the top right corner here, or else follow the link in the description below. All right, so I think it's safe to say that if there's one thing that has improved my packing setup over the last handful of years, well, it's the rear rack. I've done a full video on why I really like rear racks for almost all types of bike packing, highlighting a few standout options currently out there. But as I'd say the market evolves and more options become available, well, that video might eventually become dated. So while we're not there yet, this MICA Rat Tail would certainly have been added to that list. So just quickly to explain why I like rear racks. Well, paired with a dry bag, they expand storage space, often allowing you to carry as much, if not more, than a regular seat pack. They are typically more stable, keep weight a little bit lower on the bike, and they let you use most, if not all, of your dropper posts. Of course, there are some downsides here. You know, you've got the installation side of things. Not all bikes are compatible with racks. It could also add weight. And while racks simply have a, I'd say, not as great reputation than seat packs over rough terrain. That all said, I've actually never had a rack break. Bend, sure, but not break. But I have had plenty of seat packs fail from, say, broken buckles or torn stitching, and yeah, so on. And while racks aren't always the easiest to install, especially on bikes without rack mounts, that's where the MICA Rat Tail comes into play. MICA is a one-man band run by Skylar DesRoches in North Vancouver, BC, Canada. He has a history of tinkering with and designing small, clever solutions to make bike packing easier, contributing to products like Porcelain Rocket's microwave panniers, the 52HZ frame packs, the Dumpling hip pack, and the Nigel, which are all now produced by Rockgeist. More recently, he has dedicated most of his time to the MICA rack, or now what is known as the MICA Rat Tail, a minimal universal rack that works on nearly any bike. So Skylar started developing this particular rack in 2017, refining the design over the years. And well, he finally landed on a viable production model last year. The earlier prototypes, like the one actually Miles tested and reviewed for the website last year, were actually handmade by Skylar in British Columbia. But to expand production and focus on designing other products, he actually outsourced manufacturing to Taiwan. So the rack I tested is one of those production models. So the MICA Rat Tail is, well, one of the simplest rack designs that I've ever seen and used. It features a 4130 chromoly steel tube top platform here, measuring 17 inches or 425 millimeters, with upright stays on the sides here. It's kind of like this arch that are about 12 inches or 350 millimeters long. So these connect using stainless steel clamps and a nut and bolt locking nut and bolt system. So the top platform actually attaches to a kind of seat post mount using a two-piece 35 millimeter 6061 T6 aluminum clamp, which can be mounted directly onto, say, steel tubing or onto a seat post with the included 27.2, 30.9, and 31.6 millimeter shims. The key here is the aluminum clamp is 2 pieces, so you don't need to remove your seat post to install it. So once installed, the 2 bolts secure that clamp in place. So the second mounting point is, well, the seat stays, where the rack actually is secured using these nylon blocks and industrial strength zip ties. It then connects to the rack using a bolt and locking nut system. The sides of the rack also feature 3 pack mounts, each with 10 millimeter long M5 bolts, allowing for additional attachment options. So the full rack, including all of the mounting hardware and used zip ties, come in at 428 grams and has a weight capacity of approximately 7 kilograms or 15 pounds. So that makes it lighter than almost any other rack on the market, as you can see here on this list, but it also is one of the lowest in terms of weight capacity. So there's obviously a trade-off there. And while we're at it, it is worth comparing the MICA Rat Tail to seat packs. Seat packs generally have limited capacity, especially dropper specific ones. Plus, their weight can actually prevent some droppers from actually fully rebounding. So impressively, the MICA Rat Tail is actually lighter than some seat packs. One that comes to mind is the Ortlieb Seat Pack QR, which weighs 626 grams. While that bag actually holds 13 liters, it's pretty big for a dropper specific bag. I'd argue that the MICA Rat Tail can actually accommodate any size dry bag to a degree. But of course, well, dry bags weights are not actually added into the rack weight, as it is not an included part of the rack. So I've used a lot of racks before, from the Old Man Mountain Elkhorn to the Tumbleweed T-Rack, Tailfin Aero Pack, Ortlieb Quick Rack, and even the older Salsa Minimalist Rack, which I should mention is very similar to this design, but is no longer available. So the main selling point of this rack is that you don't need any braze-ons or rack mounts. You can use the block system and the provided seat tube or seat post clamp, which is great since not every bike actually has rack mounts. And additional axle mounting options can also, well, add up in price and also become a little bit frustrating to install, especially with all the different derailleur systems out in the world these days. So the installation process, it's pretty darn simple. After all, it was designed to fit almost any bike, except full suspension bike, since the rack doesn't actually have a pivot. But depending on your bike's size or your preferred orientation, it can be installed with that top platform, either facing up or down. So Skylar recommends actually keeping the upright struts as straight as possible. So from there, you can kind of figure out the best position. So I actually followed Skylar's video on his YouTube channel, which suggests figuring out the top platform orientation first, if you want to flip it up or down, and then installing the aluminum clamp, tightening the small front bolt all the way down. Then installing the platform to the clamp using that 45 millimeter bolt and then loosely tightening it all together. Next, you'll want to attach the upright struts to the stainless steel clamp tabs, and those should actually be pointed backwards and left loose at first so that you can adjust the positioning of the clamps before fully tightening them down on the upper platform. So Skylar actually mentions that the rack is the strongest if the mounting point is about 15 centimeters or 6 inches from the end. So once you've found a good spot for those uprights, then I like to kind of take a piece of tape or just kind of mark or just kind of memorize where I actually plan to mount those blocks. Electrical tape actually works fine. That's actually what he recommends, but frame saver tape is also another good option. So from here, zip tie the blocks down using the provided industrial strength zip ties, which are much stronger than your standard ones. You'll definitely want to use these. The key here is that you'll want to use pliers to actually tighten them down properly. I actually like to heat up the zip ties or even just leave them in the sun for maybe an hour or two so that they kind of can form a little bit easier and then cinch them down even more. I've actually always done this and it has worked really well both for the Elkhorn rack and now the MICA rack. So after that, you tighten down the clamps, the seat post, bolt, and the mounting block screws, and well, you're ready to rock. So Skylar mentions that he actually likes to install the rack about 1.5 to 4 centimeters above that closest point of the tire. I guess the main thing here is that you'll want to just ensure that your dry bag and straps, once tightened down, won't rub against the tire. So make sure to kind of dry fit all of that before tightening the rack down. So one alternative mounting option for an additional 12 USD is the seat stay bridge adapter. So this actually attaches the upper platform using, say, the brake or fender mount points, making it a useful option for bikes that are, say, maybe a little bit bigger or with longer seat tubes. So moving on to actually using this thing. So I actually used a few different types of stuff sacks and dry bags paired with a static cam strap or nylon volet style strap. And I had no issues with the straps or the bags shifting once tightened down to the rack. So I used the rack on both the Otzo Workin that I reviewed this fall and my new Good Day Curiosity custom frame. Both bikes I ended up mounting using the blocks and the aluminum seat post or say seat tube clamp. So on the Otzo Workin, I actually didn't come with a dropper post, so I didn't lower the weight as much as I could have. And this actually would have been a really good bike for that seat stay bridge adapter. In hindsight, I actually think I should have installed the aluminum clamp below the seat post and maybe have lowered the block slightly on the frame. I also think I could have eked out the clearance to have used those seat stay rack mounts on that particular bike, which I think would have been my preferred setup over the blocks. That said, the rack remained super solid and extremely stable with absolutely zero movement while riding. So on the hardtail, I learned that I wanted, well, to lower the weight a little bit more, especially since I wanted full use of my 175 millimeter dropper post. So I was able to mount the rack below the seat post clamp and attach the blocks to the seat stay. So this setup worked great, and it gave me the opportunity to use my full dropper while also storing a lot of gear back there. So the only thing I noticed from time to time was the occasional brushing of my upper thigh with the dry bag, or I guess my hamstring. It was never really annoying, and I think it could have actually been avoided with a more narrow stuff sack or dry bag, but something worth considering when choosing your specific bag. But overall, the setup had no wiggle, and after inspecting everything at the end of my ride, the bolts stayed tight and the blocks didn't slip. So at the end of a long day, one of the best things about this particular system is just, well, how easy it is to unstrap the dry bag and access your gear. It functions just like any rack, really, in that regard. But I think one of the cool things is the no cross rails in the middle of that upper platform kind of help the dry bag sit snugly without interference while keeping the weight down. While it's not designed for panniers, I think the 3-pack mounts on the sides allow for that additional light attachment, maybe some small fork mounted bags or water storage, which is really nice. Another really great feature is how easy it is to travel with when, say, packing the bike for transport. The rack folds flat and is super easy to store. All right, so someone recently told me that no product is 100% perfect. There's always a compromise in design. And I actually think that, well, that applies here too. While Skylar designed this rack to fit nearly any bike, I do actually wish it had either maybe a secondary upright option or a longer upright to make it easier to mount to, say, standard rack points, which are common on many frames these days. And I do know that this is something that he is testing, but I'm just unsure where the design process is in that regard. I'd also absolutely love to see a pivoting clamp system, so this could actually work on full suspension bikes. Now, I know this is a bigger ask. It might not be as easy. I'm not totally sure what that would look like. Maybe the uprights could mount to the axle while the platform attaches to, say, the upper seat stay. But it would be an awesome setup for full suspension compatibility. At the same time, I know that's not a priority, as this use case will certainly be kind of few and far between. All right, so other than those changes, I'd say this is a very well-designed little rack. It's perfect for someone who doesn't necessarily need to carry a ton of gear on the back, but, well, you technically still can carry probably more than those seat packs that are currently available on the market. If you want that expandable space too, you've got that with the 3-pack mounts. And it's perfect for, say, single track or rough gravel routes. It's super stable, holds a dry bag extremely well, and, well, is about as universal as it gets. Maybe the best part is that with the rise of stock dropper posts on many bikes now, the rack lets you use most, if not all, of your dropper travel. So as for weight and durability, yeah, that's hard to ignore. If anything, maybe I'd bring, say, an extra bolt or some locking nuts, but really I'd be more worried about seat pack stitching failing before the MICA rack, to be honest here. The MICA Rat Tail comes in at 185 USD, not the cheapest option, especially since you'll need to actually purchase or use a different dry bag. But the fact that it's lightweight, built to last, and works on nearly any bike should check a lot of boxes for most. So what do you all think about the MICA Rat Tail? Please, let's discuss in the comment section below. And if you like what you saw in this video and want to see more like it, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell. And if you want to help support this YouTube channel, everything we're doing at BIKEPACKING.com, you can do so by joining the Bikepacking Collective. The Collective offers a lot of awesome perks, including industry discounts, monthly giveaways, and the twice-yearly Bikepacking Journal. So to learn a little bit more about the Bikepacking Collective, you can click on the card in the top right corner, or also follow the link in the description below. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, pedal further.